Hello, all my little weirdos. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to Serial Killer Saturdays, where each episode I bring you the gruesome details and facts on one of the many famous serial killers on the planet. This episode, we are going to need a time machine and an airplane because this week we are heading to Sacramento, California, where we are going to pull up to a boarding home. At first glance, you see a little old lady with big glasses, gray hair, and old lady clothes, and you think to yourself, she couldn't hurt a fly. But you would be dead wrong because this lady is the star of today's serial killer episode. Let me introduce to you Dorothea Puente, aka Death House Landlady, aka Killer Landlady. Dorothea owned and operated a boarding home in Sacramento, California in the 1980s. She mainly targeted the elderly and the mentally disabled as her tenants. Some of the most innocent and helpless humans just needed a place to go to get some help with everyday life. And here comes old Dorothea to poison them, bury them in her backyard, and still keep their Social Security checks going while they were not. Her killing spree started in 1982 and ended in 1988 when she was arrested for murder and fraud after sparking a nationwide manhunt. I knew this woman was a shit-ass human because she's a serial killer, but I didn't realize just how big of a shit-ass human she was until I started diving into her earlier life. So let's go ahead and dive into that first. Dorothea was born on January 9th, 1929 to two alcoholics. So the shit-ass nut didn't fall far from the shit-ass tree, apparently. Her alcoholic father would often threaten to kill himself, going as far as to hold a gun to his head in front of his children. He actually ended up dying of tuberculosis in 1937 when Dorothea was just 8 years old. Her alcoholic mother was also a sex worker, and she ended up losing custody of her children in 1938. It's unclear just how many kids the two shit-knockers had, but reports show that Dorothea was one of 7, possibly 8 children. At the end of the year that she lost custody of her kids, Dorothea's mother died in a motorcycle accident, leaving her and her siblings to an orphanage. It was also reported that Dorothea was repeatedly sexually abused at this orphanage. So all of this before turning 10 years old. At the age of 16, Dorothea married her first husband. They had 2 kids together, but one was sent to live with relatives and the infant was put up for adoption because their mother put the family in a financial strain after getting arrested. Dorothea was caught forging checks and spent a total of 4 months in jail with 3 years probation. Shortly after her release, her husband left her. Her second marriage came in 1952, but the merchant seaman that she bagged didn't know he married a liar because she actually went by the name Taya, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the last name because I know I'll just disrespect it. But she went by the name Taya and said she was a Muslim woman of Egyptian and Israeli descent. This was a norm for Dorothea. She used aliases throughout her adult life. She lied about her age and she fudged her background to cover up the criminal record that she had. So anyways, hubby number 2 was a merchant seaman, so he was gone for stretches at a time, and old Dottie took advantage of this. She would invite men back to her home and gamble away her husband's money. Not only that, but she was also arrested in 1960 for owning and operating a bookkeeping firm that was a front for a brothel. She was a busy gal while her husband was away. So she was found guilty and sentenced to only 90 days in jail. And I tell you what, hubby number 2 deserves an award because he didn't leave her when she ran a full-on brothel behind his back, and he still didn't leave her when he had her committed to a mental institute in 1961. After her binge drinking, constantly lying, her severe criminal behavior, and multiple suicide attempts, She was admitted and later diagnosed as a pathological liar with an unstable personality. Her husband did, however, leave her shortly after her admission, and the divorce was finalized in 1966. Dorothea said, newly divorced, who dis, and she totally transformed her persona. She went by the name Sharon Johansson, Johansson being her surname, and portrayed herself to be a devout Christian. Dorothea or Sharon or Taya or whoever the hell she was, she deserves an Academy Award for her performances because not only did she magically find God and became a nice Christian lady, she also established her new reputation as a caregiver. She was known to provide young women with a safe place from poverty and abuse without charge. How nice. If she wasn't a shit-ass human. Husband number 3 was short and not so sweet. Married in 1968, they separated after just 16 months, with Dorothea claiming domestic violence. This divorce was finalized in 1973, but Dorothea continued to use this husband's last name, Puente, for the remainder of her life. Again, divorce became her, and she transformed, this time into a respectable older matron. She sealed that identity by wearing vintage old lady clothes, large glasses, and she kept her hair gray. She became a quote-unquote genuine resource to the community by aiding alcoholics, the homeless, the elderly, and the mentally ill. She held AA meetings and helped her tenants sign up for their Social Security benefits. How sweet. All of that came to an end in 1978 when she was arrested and convicted of cashing a total of 34 state and federal checks that did not belong to her. They belonged to her tenants. She was given 5 years probation and had to pay a $4,000 restitution. One of her probation stipulations was that she could no longer operate a boarding house. So she found a loophole, moved to a different home, and became an in-home caregiver instead. So now we are going to get into Dorothea's victims. She really thought she was slick with her first kill, but of course the truth always comes to light. Ruth Monroe was 61 years old when she was found unresponsive in the home of Dorothea. The obvious cause was a drug overdose, and Dorothea was able to manipulate the situation by telling the cops on scene that Ruth was deeply depressed and suicidal. Her death was deemed a suicide at the time, but her family always suspected Dorothea of foul play, and they pushed for further investigation. Unfortunately, that further investigation didn't come until other bodies were found in the backyard of the boarding home. After her first kill, she was arrested and convicted of robbery and administering drugs to commit the robbery in 1982. She was caught drugging 2 different people on 2 different accounts, so they would be out cold when she robbed them blind. Her shenanigans caught up to her, and she was sentenced to only 5 years in prison. She served 3 of those 5, being released early due to good behavior. While she was serving her measly 3 years in prison, she found herself a pen pal who eventually became her boyfriend and her next victim. 77-year-old Everson Gilmouth was enamored with this little old lady, and he was there to pick her up when she was released from prison, moved on in with her in the boarding home, and even opened a joint bank account with her. It wasn't long after the joint bank account thing that Dorothea administered a lethal dose of prescription drugs and killed her man. But she did make sure to cash his monthly Social Security checks, and she even wrote letters to his friends and family to keep her charade going. Everson's body wasn't discovered until 1986 when a fisherman came upon a wooden box on the bank of the Sacramento River. When he opened the box, he found the remains of a man who was much later identified as Everson Gilmouth. After her first 2 murders, Dorothea decided that her tactics were just too taxing. I guess she got tired after she transported her boyfriend's remains and decided to keep it more local. Leona Carpenter, age 78, was the first victim buried in the backyard of the boarding home. She was administered a lethal dose of prescription drugs, and witnesses say she was very ill and she was on the couch convulsing, so there was no way she could have gotten up to administer the medicine herself. Dorothy Miller, age 64, was also poisoned and found in the backyard. The lady that she trusted to be her caretaker used various meds to kill her, gave her a little medicine cocktail. 62-year-old James Gallup was another victim of prescription drugs, but his was a mixture of tranquilizers and sedatives. He was also found in the mass grave. We also have 64-year-old Vera Faye Martin, and I think this lady gave Dorothea a run for her money. She was found buried in the backyard, and although her toxicology report showed flurazepam in her system, it was questioned if that was the cause of death or if she was buried alive. Because scratch marks were found inside of her makeshift grave, giving them the impression that she was still alive or regained consciousness after she was buried. Alvera Montoya, age 51, was one of Dorothea's mentally handicapped tenants, and it's been said that she was able to convince him to do her heavy lifting when burying the bodies in the backyard, and that just makes me so angry. Like, she already pissed me off, but this just tugged at my heart. But in the end, Alvera was also found in the mass grave after that monster laced his food with a lethal mix of prescription drugs. Benjamin Fink, age 55, was also found buried in the backyard, and his toxicology report indicated he was drugged as well. Then we have Betty Mae Palmer, one of Dorothea's 78-year-old tenants. She was drugged, dismembered, and buried in the backyard. However, her head, her hands, and her lower legs were never located. She was later able to be identified by previous medical x-rays, though. So, how did Old Lady finally get caught? Let's dive into that. It started with a lady named Brenda, who was previously locked up with Dorothea, and then she was later a tenant. She went to the cops and told them that Dorothea kept her drugged for months on end while cashing her Social Security checks. Some reports claim that she also told the cops that there were bodies buried in the backyard. If she did or did not tell them that last part, they actually didn't do anything until one of the tenant's social workers got involved. Alvaro Montoya's social worker tried numerous times to reach him after he missed his check-in, and after getting runaround after runaround from Dorothea, she ended up filing a missing persons report, and that report was caused to investigate the boarding home. The cops went and searched the home. They questioned Dorothea, but they didn't find anything suspicious. Before leaving, they did ask if they could dig in the backyard to follow up on a tip they received. Dorothea consented, and they got to digging, first finding Leona Carpenter. And I find this next part weird because after finding the body, they obviously questioned Dorothea, but they ended up letting her go because of lack of evidence. And I just don't get it because there was a dead body in her backyard. Anyways, after she was released, she hauled ass to Los Angeles. She was a granny on the run. A nationwide manhunt was now out for her head. And I guess she felt invincible because she was out drinking at a bar when she got to LA. A man that she met at the bar recognized her from the news, and he's the one that called the cops. And that was when she was finally arrested on November 16th, 1988. In 1993, this killer landlady was convicted of 3 murder charges. They did originally have her pinned for 9 total, but the jury deadlocked on the other 6, resulting in a mistrial for those cases. The jury again deadlocked when deciding if she should get the death penalty, and the prosecutor just decided not to retry that phase. So Dorothea ended up with a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole on December 10th, 1993. She was 64 years old at the time of her sentence. All that ruckus she caused, and she got the easy way out. While serving her life sentence, she died of natural causes at the age of 82 in March of 2011. So, that is the wild story of our granny killer, the killer landlady, Dorothea Puente. If you have any other serial killers you would like for me to do an episode on, drop a comment below. And until next time, bye.